Welcome to the January 30th, 2015 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on a Longmont man's 12th alleged DUI offense that's putting the issue of a felony DUI law back in the headlines. Lawmakers plan to bring a bill to the House Judiciary Committee next week that would make a person's third DUI in 7 years, or fourth over any period, a felony. Patty, the discussion right before we rolled tape was already ruckus, trying to figure out why this has had such a problem getting through the legislature so far. There's Democratic and Republican co-sponsors from the Senate and the House. Is it mind-boggling that we don't have this in the books already?
It is, because we have so many instances, not just this guy, but other people who have been killed by drunk drivers who have had 6, 7, 8 DUIs. And somehow they've just escaped the weird scheduling that they have, on when you can acquire them. But I don't know, is there such a huge pro-drunk driver lobby in the legislature? It doesn't make any sense. If you think of one kind of bill, one kind of act that would deter people from maybe thinking about drunk driving, it would be the fact that they could get locked up forever, or not forever, but for a very, very long time if they do this. And now, they say it's too expensive to do it. That's why it fell apart before. Let's get Uber to pay for it. Let's get Lyft. I mean, we finally have all these different options if you need a ride home. Let's get them. They'll have a lot of business. It'll take care of it, make the streets safer. But somehow, whoever is the pro-drunk driving lobby has got to rein it in this time.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. I don't even pretend to know too much about the law. When it comes to making this a felony, is this basically supposing that even if I have my 12th DUI, the judge has no other thing to punish me with than simply take away my license and more fines?
Well, no. If it's a misdemeanor, you can be in jail for up to a year. Okay. So it's certainly not something where you just have to take your $10,000 drunk driving education course for the 12th time. It might be a good idea just for the simple fairness of you're bad enough, you should repeatedly it should be a felony. But I think it can be oversold. First of all, this guy who's on his 12th drunk driving conviction. Well, I bet he didn't have a driver's license at that point, and yet he was out there and driving. So you say, oh, maybe after conviction 3, instead of maybe he spent 4 months in the county jail, let's say he spent 4 years in state prison, which is a lot, and prison space is scarce. It means somebody else who might be better in prison wasn't there, but so he gets out of prison after 4 years. You think he's going to stop drunk driving? The vast majority of these repeat offenders don't have licenses in the first place, and they have served time in jail and are not deterred. So I'm not so sure that the possibility of a felony conviction, which doesn't necessarily lead to prison time anyway, and if it does, it is not going to lead to 20 or 30-year sentences that are going to say keep these people permanently off the road. So it might be a good idea, but I would be careful about overselling the benefits. And I think another concern is, under the influence of the alcohol prohibition group, which calls itself Mothers Against Drunk Driving, there are people, you can be a DUI, and you're not really driving drunk. It may not be prudent at that level to have 0.08 alcohol, but that's not the same as what we think of as classic drunk driving, where the person is seriously impaired.
But I think some of that would be taken care of because it's not just your first DUI. It would be after your third in 7 years. I mean, you have to be showing that there's a problem.
Oh, yeah, and maybe after 2 convictions, just stop drinking at all before you drive. That would probably be a good idea.
I would agree. That'd be a good idea. Penfield Tate, attorney with Greenberg, Traurig, also a longtime state lawmaker. Now, I realize that the current lawmakers weren't your colleagues when you served, but help us understand a little bit about how something like this that seems to have bipartisan support, that seems fairly commonsensical to the public, has not been able to get passed over these years.
I think there are a couple of things. What we have found in many instances is that habitual offender sentencing statutes don't necessarily work. Unless you're prepared to just put a whole bunch of people in prison and never see them again. And I don't know if anyone's suggesting that. I'm not an expert in the treatment field, but this is one of those instances where as a former lawmaker, I wish someone who was an expert came up with a different solution. If you've got somebody who's been convicted of driving drunk or impaired 11 times before, they don't have a license, they probably don't have a job, or if they have a job, they're a functional alcoholic, which is even more frightening. Some other sort of intervention is needed here. And I know people are reluctant to say, well, let's, rather than put somebody in the county jail for a year, mandate that they go to some treatment facility for a year and get tested on a weekly basis. Something else needs to happen with some of these truly habitual offenders, because sooner or later they're going to take their own life or someone else's lives, and we don't have the room or the money to lock everybody up forever over something like impaired or drunk driving. We've got to change the paradigm here and think outside of the box and deal with this group of folks differently, because it's a problem. Putting them in jail hasn't worked. Convicting them hasn't worked. Something else needs to be done.
Susan Green, editor of ColoradoIndependent.com. It looks like there is a lot of support for this. I think there's things that government wants to spend money on that there's going to be arguments in the public about, whether it's schools or entitlement programs, whatever it is. On this one, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, let's actually spend some money keeping the streets a bit safer because they're not driving, whatever, if it's programs that Penn talked about or jail, whatever it is. Why do you think this hasn't passed yet?
Well, I think there's this argument that it's so expensive to keep people in jail and to incarcerate people. I think Penn is right about people not thinking out of the box. There is technology that people have to blow into things for their car to start. But I think it's so popular. It hasn't passed because the lawmakers aren't listening to the people, and I don't agree that Mothers Against Drunk Driving is an alcohol prohibition group, and I don't believe that this is a partisan issue. I think people know people who have been killed by drunk drivers, and it scares parents, it scares people tremendously, and I think there's a certain unfairness to this that the lawmakers need to think about, is that we put debtors in jail. We put people who go into debt in a recession in jail. And this guy is just walking around, and I want to name this guy, please let me take the opportunity, Mr. 12 DUIs, Dan Brooks with 11 priors. I mean, whose fingers, what cracks did he fall through to even get in a car and be driving that 12th time? So I do think the lawmakers need to think about what the public wants, and I think they also need to think about what is law enforcement doing to catch these people. I mean, there are 11 priors on the books. That's not a super difficult case to identify.
That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Out postgame this week. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.